God anticipated modern Israel and revealed to the Old Testament prophets significant and unique milestones that were to be expected. God would look to a particular generation in a particular time frame to restore Israel. The last 100 years have provided the framework for the rebirth of this nation. Consider some of the major biblical prophetic voices that spoke to events that would happen thousands of years later. And indeed, those events, as prophesied, are now unfolding in our day. Before Judah went into the first exile in Babylon, the prophet Isaiah wrote, "Then it will happen on that day that the Lord will again recover the second time with his hand the remnant of his people, who will remain from Assyria, Egypt, Pathros, Cush, Elam, Shinar, Hamath, and from the islands of the sea. And he will lift up a standard for the nations, and will assemble the banished ones of Israel, and will gather the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth." Note, Isaiah was writing before the first dispersion of Israel under Babylon. The return from Babylonian and Assyrian exile was the first regathering of the Jews to Jerusalem. Nearly a century later, Nehemiah led another group from Shushan in Persia. Isaiah's prophecy, however, anticipated another expulsion out of the land. This happened under the Romans in 70 and 135 AD, and Jewish people ended up being scattered to the four corners of the earth. Their return to the land thousands of years later became a fulfillment of Isaiah's prediction of an end-time global regathering of Jews to Israel. Specifically, in Jeremiah chapter 16, verses 14 through 15, the prophet Jeremiah prophesied about a massive ingathering of Jews out of the land of the north that would surpass the miracle of the Jews being released from the bondage of Egypt. Ezekiel then prophesied that God would one day bring the people of Israel back to Israel as a united nation. When he prophesied this, Israel was divided into two separate kingdoms which had been conquered by foreign invaders. Ezekiel further spoke more specifically about the national restoration of Israel when he spoke to the dry bones in Ezekiel 37. He noted that once the bones became assembled with flesh, blood, and tendons, God would provide a solution for Israel's national restoration into their homeland, followed by spiritual regeneration. Indeed, on May 14, 1948, the Jewish people living in the Holy Land announced the establishment of the modern state of Israel. For the first time in 2,900 years, Israel was now a sovereign and independent nation. Not only would God restore the Jewish people to the land, he would also restore and bless the land of Israel so that it would bloom and prosper to sustain the people returning to it. Speaking through Ezekiel, God said, "But you, mountains of Israel, will produce branches and fruit for my people, Israel, for they will soon come home. I am concerned for you and will look on you with favor, and you will be plowed and sown, and I will cause many people to live on you. Yes, all of Israel. The towns will be inhabited and the ruins rebuilt." And so it is that we now see that the Jewish people have rebuilt the ancient ruins and restored the places long devastated. The seed is growing well, the vine is yielding its fruit, and the ground is producing its crops just like Zechariah prophesied thousands of years ago. Interestingly, God also showed his prophets that the Gentiles would have a major role in caring for the Jewish people and assisting them to return to the land. Speaking through Isaiah, God said, "See, I will beckon to the nations. I will lift up my banner to the peoples. They will bring your sons in their arms and carry your daughters on their hips." In the current evolving story of Israel, God wanted the Gentiles to understand their role toward his people, Israel. He did not want Gentiles to miss it as previous generations did. Accordingly, he initiated a Gentile awakening that precipitated the important actions needed to see Israel restored nationally. It has been the Gentiles, primarily Gentile believers, who have assisted in bringing the Jews back to Israel, have stood as advocates in their own governments on behalf of Israel, and have strongly supported the rebuilding of Israel, including helping pay for it. As strongly as the Gentiles rejected the Jews and mistreated them for thousands of years, God is now using the Gentiles to become their most loving caretakers. God is continuing to awaken Gentiles all over the world out of a misunderstanding toward the Jews. He is redeeming the relationship between Jews and Gentiles as he brings the two groups together to continue the rebuilding of the nation of Israel and to care for the people. In the restoration of modern Israel, God's attitude toward the Jewish people will be addressed and acted on by a generation who actually sees the Jewish prophecies of Israel unfold and his tender mercies revealed.